Hi there, everyone. I'm just delighted to be able to introduce you today to Mirte Gosker, who is the current managing director of the fantastic international organization that we all know and love, the Good Food Institute, APAC in particular, so the Asia Pacific region. Mirte, you have such a fantastic track record in universities, in research. You've got international development qualifications, and you have founded an amazing altruistic organization, benevolent fund that I will let you talk about and want to ask you about later. How did all your wonderful experience and qualifications get you to the Good Food Institute?
Thank you, Lisa. I started out indeed in academics in humanitarian logistics at business school in INSEAD. But got kind of infected with the entrepreneurial bug, being surrounded by all these entrepreneurial-minded MBAs. So I started to run my own company, and then within the early days of the startup community in Amsterdam, I joined an accelerator. I started a boot camp, worked with them for a couple of years from Amsterdam, started to look at the European operations, then moved to Singapore, ran the first program here in Singapore. Singapore is small. Singapore is not specifically well known for being a philanthropic hub or anything. So with my ex-husband and his late grandfather, we started the family foundation. But from there, I started to look into impact measurement. Right after our initial plan, we looked into impact measurement and realized we could do much better. And that was because I came across the effective altruism community. And the effective altruism community doesn't only have like a whole philosophy about how you can do good better with donations, with like philanthropy, but also with your career. And that was basically how I started to really rethink my career and what I could do with like my limited skill set. GFI APAC at the time was quite small. I loved their cause, and that is how I got introduced to them.
Can you tell us why does the Good Food Institute exist?
The main reason we exist is that we want alternative proteins no longer to be alternative. So we are a think and do tank, founded 8 years ago in America. And we're now active in Brazil, in Europe, in Israel, in India, and in Asia Pacific. And what we basically try to do is take away the hurdles for the alternative protein industry to grow to its full potential. And the reason that we're doing that is because industrial animal agriculture is incredibly bad for the environment, for the animals, for public health, and also for food security.
Mirte, what does the Good Food Institute in the Asia Pacific region think of as the greatest immediate challenge we face in transforming our food system down this side of the world?
We simply cannot continue to consume the amount of meat and produce meat the way we currently do with a growing population, right? So by 2050, we are expected to have 10 million people on the planet. Majority will be in our region. Like the growth is coming from here. And while we see that per capita consumption of meat is not as high yet, once the APAC population catches up on per capita meat consumption that we see in Europe and in America, that is just completely unsustainable. We simply have not enough earth and not enough land on planet Earth to grow enough feed for the animals to then slaughter the animals and eat them. So we're currently using a land mass the size of India plus China times 2 plus Indonesia to simply grow feed and to graze the animals. That is unfortunately not possible in the future if we need to feed 2 billion people more.
Thank you. And it's the message that I hear resoundingly from all of the experts I speak to around the world. And I suppose for me in little old Western Australia, it's frustrating, Mirte, because I think people assume that I'm out on a ledge here doing really weird stuff that nobody really understands why I'm on about it. But we're a very rich country with a lot of food, and we have a meat consumption which is incredibly high, right up there with America and the UK. So while we're part of the APAC region, we are certainly the developed part, and our meat consumption is unsustainably high in my view. So I'm really interested in what your knowledge in this area tells you the best role that Australia has to play helping the Good Food Institute's pathway to find a better solution for food.
I think Australia, like Singapore and Japan and South Korea, is perfectly positioned to play a big role in the transition. Because right now, the products that are out there, the plant-based products, the cultivated meat products, they are not, especially the plant-based products, not tasty enough, not nutritious enough, but much more expensive. So we need governments to pitch in. Because for alternative proteins, I would say it's not that we need to go completely back to the drawing board, but we're just not there yet. So we need more innovation. We need more scientific studies to fix some of the problems that we still have, whether it's taste, whether it's nutrition, whether it's texture of these products. And for that, we need funding. And that funding doesn't come from VCs, because VCs, they want quick return. And what the sector needs is patient capital that's a little bit more creative, maybe, that comes from nonprofits, from governments, from a mixture of that. And therefore, Australia is very well positioned because, like you said, it's a very rich country. It has very good scientific institutions like CSIRO. There are already a couple of really well-known and good startups in the field. You also have a lot of production capacity. So I think that Australia has a quite unique position, very different from Singapore, where I am based, where we have no land available, right, for any kind of production.
The great thing about Singapore, from my perspective as an Australian, though, Mirte, is that the government has a long-term plan to be self-sufficient in food. You can't do that without complementary or alternative proteins. I've watched Singapore stalking every major country who is doing work in this area so skillfully to develop the country's own strategic direction in this space. For Australia, you probably would have had a look at the paper that I recently released called Transforming the Food System. That's specifically talking to Western Australian government about what we need to do. It's not rocket science. We need to get our collective act together. We need to get the departments who are involved in food and the production process, climate action, innovation, food technology, all of those players need to come together and actually form a view about how to best move forward a food system which is more sustainable and which doesn't contribute to 37% of global greenhouse gases, as we know the current animal food production base industry does. And I totally agree from what I'm seeing with some of our new startups and from what I hear from America and others where they've got lots of innovation happening, is that it's the VCs are very keen to get on board with the flashy, sharp, creative end of R&D. But then when you say, well, we actually need a 10-acre factory and a whole bunch of equipment to continue to, to upscale all this, the money isn't so easy to come by. So that is definitely an area that I've also called on our government to get behind. Mirte, I do have one special question that I'd like to ask before I say goodbye. If it was one superpower I could give you to support and advance your work, what you're really passionate about in this life, what would that be?
Good question again. I actually think it would be a photographic memory. Because by now we see so many reports coming out from the World Bank, from like a lot of very credible organizations basically backing us up, right? But I would love to just be able to replicate all those numbers like this. Because when I'm talking to like government leaders, to philanthropists, it's just great to have all those numbers because they're so compelling. And if it's not just us saying this, independent organizations, well-respected organizations sharing these numbers of how alternative proteins is simply one of the best, most tractable solutions to get to a sustainable food system and reach the Paris climate goals. Because without alternative proteins, it's not going to happen. So yeah, I think that would be helpful in my negotiations.
Total recall, no problem. I will put the message through and we'll see if we can get you that. Trying to keep up with the pace of change is so challenging and somewhat distressing for us here in WA who are trying to work on change and keeping up with the agenda. Sometimes I think that the most important job that people like I can do is to try and open people's ears to what the facts are and what is coming so that they at least start to hear the conversations. You are amazing. Thank you for all you're doing with GFI and with the Vander's Foundation. Surely your contribution will stand in the history books as something significant, not just for Singapore, but for the whole APAC region. I really look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. You're too kind.